What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Trying a slightly different camera angle and a little bit less light just because my brother's making a video right now and he's using the light. And I didn't really feel like grabbing the huge spotlight. So today we're going to talk about this book that I finished, and then we're going to talk about the current reads, and then we'll get into the book haul. And then we'll kind of get into the flesh and bone of this topical video today. We're going to be talking about the importance of why it's important to collect books, why it's good to have books, CDs, vinyl, anything tangible, right? We're living in a digital age, my friends, but it doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself to just streaming or your Kindle, and all that stuff is good to have. You know, it's good to have things backed up digitally, but there's nothing like having the real thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Got a really nice stack of new books here we're going to talk about today. Not too many, but a nice little collection. So we did finally blow through my Confederate Kinfolk. Super interesting, book. A super interesting historical book. Now, I'm not going to do like a full review of this because it is so heavily historically based. It's not a work of fiction or literature where you can kind of speculate and stuff like that. So, you know, it would definitely take a little bit more time and some more rereading. I'm just going to lower this just a wee bit. I know it's terrible when you have to adjust the camera in the middle of your video. That's a little better. So this, My Confederate Kinfolk, basically traces the author's, Thulani Davis's sort of heritage, right? She's tracing her heritage, which is based in Yazoo, Mississippi. Super poor area after the Civil War. This sort of starts right at the outbreak of the Civil War and kind of goes towards the end, and then goes all through the Reconstruction period and all that good stuff, right? And she's basically trying to find both of her heritage on the, you know, obviously the African side. She's derives from slaves from the old Mississippi. Super down south type of deal, very very primitive South, you could say. But she, a lot of her relatives also traveled to New Orleans, Texas, Wisconsin, all kinds of different places, and you sort of get the overall American experience through the viewpoint of the post-Reconstruction black people, right? That's what this book centers on. But she also traces the endeavors of her white family. They were cotton owners, and some of them ran plantations. Some of them were more like middle class merchant types, worked for the railroad. But it's definitely a wake up call to the racism, the suffering that African Americans face, particularly in the South as well as the North as well. But you also get the sort of the exploration of the motivations of the Confederacy versus the Union. And the Confederacy, the Confederacy itself is obviously a somewhat of a separate entity in terms of warfare, right? The Confederacy was sort of the resistance to Abraham Lincoln's, proclamation and all that stuff, and the freedom of the slaves and all that stuff. But underneath the Confederacy itself is the Southern society that is very unwilling to give up what what they have, and that's why we had the Civil War, right? That's why we had the South, a lot of the Southern states receding from the Union and all that stuff, because they did not want to give up their slaves. They did not want to give up their plantations. They did not want to give up their industry. They had pretty much built up their entire industry off of slave labor. So from a Southern perspective, you definitely get, she definitely covers the whole gambit of why, particularly states like Mississippi and stuff like that were very resistant to Reconstruction and stuff like that. But they were kind of forced into Reconstruction, right? That's the only direction they had to go after the Civil War. You definitely get a full exploration of how they tried to pass laws and committed acts of terrorism against black Americans as well as white Americans to keep the black population from pretty much achieving anything, right? But you had a lot of heroic people, daring people in Thulani Davis's family historical history. And basically the two families are the Tarrants and the Campbells. I think the Tarrants are more like the ones that were the slaves, and the Campbells are like the the plantation owners and so on and so forth. It takes place in Yazoo County and also Alabama, Mississippi. Yazoo is even today is an extremely poor section of Mississippi. Um, and one of the main characters is named Chloe Tarrant. That's like Thulani Davis is the author's great grandmother or something like that. And of course we have the Freedmen's Bureau that sort of formed to try to get representation for blacks in Congress, and just seats on the local government, the local judges and stuff like that. And then of course we had black codes, and we had the Confederacy, the ex-Confederacy, the unions, and the rebels, and all that. And of course, with Jim Crow and the black codes, you have the rather shocking and obviously very racist, Southern heritage, right? Of the, I'm very hesitant to say whites in power, because that's a limited expression, but I guess on a local or regional level, you could say, yeah, the whites were in power, right? But there's obviously other people, bankers that are higher ups that kind of are pulling the string, so to speak, that I wouldn't necessarily consider white. But anyway, for the sake of this book review, we'll just say whites in power, and they definitely did pretty much all they could, all they could legally and illegally to suppress the American Southern black population. So it is definitely a wake-up call. It's not what I expected going into it. I was thinking maybe it was going to be a little bit more, maybe less focused on the racism and the Jim Crow and stuff like that. And she definitely drifts into other topics and other categories. But as a whole, it's, Thulani Davis's attempt to try to find where she came from. What did her relatives accomplish? Who were her relatives? And I think for black Americans in particular, unless they have the time or the resources to do a really in-depth kind of genealogy of their family history like this, it's very difficult for them to trace their ancestry up into a certain point, because documents were just not very well kept, especially among freed people, ex-slaves and stuff like that. And obviously just because they were freed, we had the Emancipation Proclamation and all that, it did, definitely did not make things easier for the black Americans, and obviously the poor whites too. It's important to remember when we're talking about Reconstruction or the post-Civil War era, we're talking about the destruction of the Southern society, right, on both ends. My cat's trying to get out here. Hold on a second, guys. Hold on, Pete. So we definitely have the the struggle of the black Americans, and then the threat of even the white Americans that were trying to help the freed people in any shape or form. And I didn't really annotate this because it's not fiction and you can't really speculate and stuff like that. Everything is pretty laid out factually. There's tons of different families in here, and they travel all over, and there's a lot of different little skirmishes that took place between the Confederacy or the Ku Klux Klan to try to keep a lot of the Southern slaves from traveling or owning businesses, owning property, voting. It took a long time for the South. I think this is probably still something the South still struggles with to this day, all across the board. But when we're talking about the post-Civil War era, we're talking about the sort of the destruction of the South, obviously, right? But we're talking about the social deconstruction, and we're also talking about the financial sort of unraveling of the South, right? And in a lot of ways, the way that the Civil War sort of played out was not good for the South on any level, because it didn't give the South any legs to stand on, in terms of their laws, in terms of their economy. It is very economy driven. Obviously, when we're talking about the South, we're talking about cotton, and we're talking about tobacco, and we're talking about various other farmers. A lot of her family heritage, derived from farmers. She talks about the struggles of being a mixed race woman as well. Mixed people were pretty much on the same category as black people. But she does have a lot of her sort of Union Confederate kinfolk in here as well. It's just interesting to think that you can be related to somebody like this, you know, a black woman, obviously, but you could also be related to a bunch of white folk, too. And that's what I kind of thought interesting about this book. It's a little hard to kind of digest because it's just so historically Southern based. And if you're not interested in that kind of thing, it's, you know, can be kind of a chore to read. And there's so many different characters and different battles and different skirmishes and different laws that were being passed. But I definitely would recommend it if you want to get sort of a more specific, kind of unique Southern history type deal under your belt. So maybe we'll go back eventually and maybe talk a little bit more about my Confederate kinfolk. But pretty much in a nutshell, it's about Thulani Davis trying to figure out her black versus white sort of, you know, not versus in the sense of, you know, a confrontational way of explaining it, but it's sort of trying to find the white and the black proof of her heritage, right? That's kind of what this book is about. And also, you know, you also have the thing with the carpetbaggers and the Freedmen's Bureau, and you got, you know, the KKK, and you got lynchings, and you got all kinds of crazy shit in here. Very unfortunate stuff, and it definitely kind of puts into perspective. As a member of the South, you know, I live in the South now. I grew up in the North, but now I live down South. But, you know, even Virginia perhaps, you know, has a lot of these, you know, historically in more modern, and obviously in a more modern sense, we're a little better off than Mississippi and Alabama in terms of, hopefully in terms of racism and stuff like that. Things are a little better here, but obviously Virginia, you know, was the was sort of the birthplace of slavery. That's where the majority of the slaves were brought to the state of Virginia. And she does talk a lot about Norfolk, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, stuff like that. So, and what's interesting is that, you know, she'll say something like, in most of the ex-Confederate states, the majorities of the population were black, and the reality of black domination at the polls became obvious to everyone. So that was obviously a fear of sort of the, you know, the landowners and I guess the white government officials, right? They were afraid of the, you know, the black population that was now free, because they didn't necessarily want them to vote and own property and do this and that, because that was a threat to their society, you know, as perceived. Now, it is obviously very focused on the historical aspect of Reconstruction. So you have this reiteration of the racism and all that stuff. So that's kind of, look here, we got Norfolk, Virginia right there. So it is very heavily focused on the, you know, the suffering and the subjugation of old Southern black Americans. There's not really much room. She doesn't really offer any other viewpoint, right? So according to Thulani Davis, this was the way that it was. Obviously, there's always exceptions and stuff, but she does talk about the identity of what it kind of means to be black in the South, what it means to be white, what it means to be mixed. So if that kind of interests you, hopefully that was a pretty in-depth review. I didn't plan on rambling for 13 minutes, but I did just want to kind of explain to you guys what that was about. So current reads, obviously we're still getting through the double. We're almost done with the double. And I'm not going to talk too much about the current reads because I don't want to spoil anything for future reviews. We will be doing a pretty in-depth review of the double maybe in another week, less than a week. So the double is really interesting, very disturbing, sort of nihilistic novel by Dostoevsky. And then we're getting our eyes and our ears through John Steinbeck's East of Eden. This is definitely one of the most compelling American novel, or I should say engaging, compelling and engaging American novels I've read in quite a long time. It's definitely a page turner. Takes maybe, you know, 10, 15, 20 pages to really get invested, but then you're really hooked on the characters. You're really hooked on John Steinbeck's writing. And there, you know, there's a lot of stuff about marriage and sexuality. There's almost like a red pill sort of rhetoric. If you read between the lines of John Steinbeck, we'll get more into that through the book review that we'll be doing. It's whenever we happen to finish that. We're obviously still studying the Bible. I've kind of jumped back to the New Testament, trying to get through the Gospels. We just finished the book of Luke, and now we're on to the book of John. So I'm trying to get the Gospels and the disciples and all that stuff under our belt. And then I think we will probably go back to the New Testament. And the Bible is obviously, you know, a lifelong sort of study, right? It's not something you just blow through. I mean, obviously you can pick any section, you know, and try to get some nourishment from it. But in terms of the Bible, you want to be able to have it under your belt in terms of what does the New Testament mean versus the Old Testament, vice versa. What is, you know, what was, you know, the ancient Christian society like before Christ? What was it like after Christ? And what is the Bible really trying to tell you? Is it all literal? Is it parables? Is it symbology? Yes, it's all those things. So that's good to have the Bible under your belt to bring to the table to other literature, right? Very important to do that. So now we're going to get into this great stack of books here. Maybe we'll try to do a quick thumbnail, just like that. So up first we have this novel called The Illuminatus Trilogy by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson. The Eye and the Pyramid, The Golden Apple, and Leviathan. So this is sort of like an esoteric Illuminati mystery novel series, I guess you could say. I'm not even exactly sure what it's about. It could be kind of you know, sort of pseudo esotericism, more like for entertainment or something, but supposedly it's supposed to be pretty eye-opening about the Illuminati and the people that kind of run the world and stuff like that. So this will be interesting to get under our belt. It's got really nice print. So I'm interested to kind of see what this is all about. It's like almost 800 pages, so it's definitely going to take some commitment. One of the reviews says more important than Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. The longest shaggy dog joke in literary history. 100 pages in, I couldn't figure out why I was wasting my time with this nonsense. After 300, I was having too much fun to quit, and by the end, I was eager to believe every word. So it is kind of entertainment. You know, I'm not sure how much truth is actually in here. It could just kind of be normie level conspiracy type stuff, but we'll have to kind of check up on that later. Up next, we have this great book called The Creators, The History of Heroes of the Imagination. This is kind of like in the vein of Robert Greene, perhaps sort of like social creative mastery and mythology and history. He covers Leonardo da Vinci, Virginia Woolf, Wagner, Handel, Giotto, Picasso, Homer, James Joyce. So Boorstin assembles them into a grand mosaic that encompasses 3,000 years of aesthetic and intellectual invention. In the process, he tells us not only how great art and great architecture and philosophy is created, but where it comes from and how it has shaped and mirrored societies from Vedic India to the 20th century United States. So this definitely seems like something that I will definitely enjoy. Art history, writing history, all that good stuff. Up next, we have this really cool book called Love and Hate in Jamestown, a little biography / historical book about, you know, Pocahontas, John Smith, and the start of the new nation. So this is going to be a really excellent supplementation to, you know, the Native American history stuff. So we're trying to kind of get that into our, you know, under our belt. You know, the novels are great, the poetry is great. Memoirs are great. The Bible is great. Plays are great. We got to get back into our plays, but I think you can reinforce all of that with knowledge from history. So that's kind of our endeavor as far as that goes. Up next, we have Cleopatra, A Life. So this is supposed to be a pretty amazing biography about Cleopatra, and it's not sensationalized. You know, it's got a lot of really good historical stuff in here, so it kind of goes back to the basics of what we know about Cleopatra and kind of follows suit there. Obviously, we're dealing with Julius Caesar and, you know, ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian history, so this should be really cool. Let me know if it's a pretty famous book, so let me know if anybody's read this. It's a national bestseller by Stacy Schiff. I think sounds like a Jewish writer, but there's a lot of good Jewish historians. So hopefully that is something that's going to be worth a read when the time comes. Up next, we have something a little bit different. I got The Wind in the Willows. I've been trying to get my hands on some more like American child folk novels and stuff like that. We have Black Beauty back there and stuff like that. I don't think I ever actually showed that. Maybe I'll show that to you guys next time. So this is a really nice sort of illustrated edition of The Wind in the Willows. And this is just going to be kind of a fun read. Maybe in the summer we'll kind of pick it up. Shouldn't be too hard to get through. If we have any fans of Wind in the Willows, let me know. It looks like it's about like a frog or a toad and maybe a mouse or something, and they sort of have a friendship and a relationship. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of this book. Really nice hardcover edition here. So let me know if we have any fans of Kenneth Grahame's and illustrated by Arthur Rackman's The Wind in the Willows. I'm sure some of you guys may have heard about that. Up next, we have something kind of interesting, The Brief History of Time, from the Big Bang to the Black Holes by Stephen Hawking. Now, I'm not a huge Stephen Hawking, NASA enthusiast or anything like that, but I think this will be very interesting to kind of get some more scientific, maybe mathematic, historical consensus of what, scientists believe, how we came to be and all that stuff, the universe. It's obviously not religious or spiritual, but it's more like, just might have some really good rabbit holes I can go down as far as, science and the history of the universe. So lastly but not least, we have A Few Acres of Snow, the saga of the French and the Indian Wars. I'm looking forward to getting into this. Looks like there's like some poo stains on the side of the book there. But other than that, really great condition. This has definitely got a lot of good reviews. It's got really nice print. It's got some maps, no illustrations though, mostly just maps. But this documents the history of the French and the Indian War, which I'm not too familiar with. I don't think the French and Indian War really has much to do with the actual Indians. I think it's more of a war between the French and maybe the British or something like that. Could be wrong, but I think the Native Americans, were trading with the French or something. So that's why it's called the French and Indian War. So we will definitely keep you guys posted on this. And I'll be kind of announcing throughout the summer what books we're going to be reading. We're kind of still getting through Dostoevsky, and we're getting through John Steinbeck, and then we've got our stack of the summer reading list with Thomas Sowell, Marcel Proust, Maureen Callahan, a book about Israel Keys, and then we've got Charles Bukowski pulp. So I think once we kind of get the double knocked out, and once we get, maybe halfway through John Steinbeck, we're going to slowly start bleeding into, I think I'm going to probably pick up Conquest and Cultures by Thomas Sowell pretty soon, probably as soon as I finish this. I try to keep my books to at least no more than 3 or 4 at a time. Of course, the Bible is always in the peripheral and stuff like that. And John Steinbeck, I'm reading it consistently, but I'm also taking my time with it. I think that's important. And Dostoevsky should be knocked out in another week, maybe less than a week. I might even finish it at work tonight. I always have lots of time to read at work, so that's a good thing about my job. Don't tell my boss that I'm reading at work. But that's what I do when it's not too busy. So, yeah, lots of cool stuff to talk about. Lots of, stuff we can maybe add to the summer reading list. I don't think the summer reading list is going to take too long. It all kind of depends on how much time I spend with East of Eden and stuff like that. But we knocked out My Confederate Kinfolk. We knocked out Dostoevsky. We read Somewhere in Time just recently. We read Notes from the Underground. So we're getting a lot of different things under our belt. Having said that, I did tell you guys that more towards the fall and sort of the winter, we are going to, try to get some female authorship under our belt. Going to be, maybe we'll make a whole video about, the books that we're anticipating reading for that. I've got a lot of really great female authors, so I think that's something will be important to kind of get into our sort of consensus. So make sure you guys send me an email, andrewmarlowe22@gmail.com. Let me know if you have any questions about these books. Offer your, ideas and suggestions for other further readings. I know I've been inspiring a lot of my friends online to start reading again, which is really great. Follow me on Instagram at Andrew Marlowe Artist Official. Definitely taking a break from Instagram, but I'll still kind of be in the peripheral, checking it every so often. And we'll have some more videos up for you guys real soon. Thank you so much. So I totally forgot to film the second segment of this topical video that we were supposed to do. So I was watching a stream by Bayes Lit Analyzer. It's kind of like a literature review, poet review, history guy, and he was talking about one of his shows was centered on post-apocalyptic literature and stuff like that, right? George Orwell and different people he was reading, I definitely recommend his channel, Based Lit Analyzer, sort of in the vein of Jay Dyer, stuff like that. Really interesting. Sort of red pilled kind of stuff. I'm not red pilled, but I guess based, I guess you could say, whatever that means. And he was talking about the importance of having physical books, physical CDs, vinyl, you know, whatever it is, DVD players, because in the context of, you know, post-apocalyptic stuff, right? Topics. You never know when the grid's going to go out, right? So I think it's really great to have physical copies of books. Obviously, you can use your Kindle, you can read stuff online, but it's just not the same. You know, if you want to reference something, or if you want to loan a book out to somebody, or you want to read the book yourself and sort of be able to reflect on your own knowledge, there's nothing like having a nice bookshelf to sort of document that process. You know, you can't really annotate on Kindle. I guess you can, maybe nowadays, but there's nothing like a physical book that you can kind of get lost in and sort of force yourself into. And so, you know, this is just kind of a little brief rant on, you know, physical books and CDs and stuff like that. Now, obviously, it gets to a point where you don't want to become a hoarder, right? You want to, you know, use your space accordingly. But I think if you know what you like to read, or you know what you like to listen to, or you know what you like to collect, you can kind of monitor it, and you'll kind of know when you're getting too much and stuff like that. But there's nothing like having a physical book collection that you can use to you know, to emotionally and mentally and spiritually nourish yourself. If you're reading stuff online all the time, you know, it's very hard to kind of keep track of it. You know, and it's just not the same, right? So, and obviously when we're talking about, you know, a post-apocalyptic situation or something, or maybe another world virus where you can't go out and shop anymore, it's like you'll be so much better off if you have a book collection or a CD collection. You know, who knows how long the streaming grid is going to last? You know, what if Dr. Fauci decides to lock us all in our house again, and we're forced to, you know, obviously you could order books on Amazon, but hopefully if you've already got some books at home and you kind of know what you like to read, you know, you'll be set for the next lockdown or the next apocalypse. So, you know, a lot of people seem to think that collecting books, buying books, CDs, vinyl is kind of antiquated, buying DVDs. But I can't tell you, you know, like I just love having a collection of DVDs that I love. You know, I don't have a whole lot of them, but I have any movie that I'm passionate about and I want to go back and watch, or I want to have on hand, I've got it on DVD for the most part. Some movies are kind of hard to find. But same thing goes for books, right? You know, if you want to share books with somebody, if you want to talk about books, if you want to reference something, if you want to reread something, you know, there's nothing like having that physical copy that you can kind of rely on. And I'll kind of close out that little rant as far as the, you know, having things on hand for the next, you know, virus or you know, apocalypse or whatever society might be facing in the future. You're going to be a lot better off if you got some physical copies of stuff that you can call your own, right? You know, you might have a great collection of books on Kindle, which is fine, but what if Kindle goes? What if you lose your Kindle membership? What if somebody hacks into your computer? But you know what I mean, there's no way to replace the analog kind of format, musically, literature wise, photography wise, art wise. You know, we're living in the age of AI. You know, they can write novels and come up with beautiful paintings now. But for me, I'll still be kind of living in my old analog bubble. You know, of course, I still use the internet, right? And I'm not completely anti-AI or anything like that, but it does come with a lot of problems. And as far as the real thing, there's nothing like the real thing. So thank you so much for watching. Sorry we forgot to, you know, record this part earlier in the video, but I'll just